"Sir, put the drill down and keep your hands where I can see them." Those were the first words Officer Nathan Cole said to me at 7:18 on a Saturday morning, while red and blue lights washed across my garage door and Linda Whitmore stood 20 feet away looking like she had already won. I set my red Milwaukee drill on the driveway and straightened slowly. The smell of fresh-cut cedar hung in the cool Tennessee air, mixed with coffee drifting through my open kitchen window. Somewhere behind the patrol cars, a sprinkler clicked across a lawn with ridiculous calm. Linda still had her phone clenched in one hand. White Lexus behind her. HOA clipboard tucked against her ribs. Perfect suburban authority costume. "That's him," she said. "Daniel Mercer. He threatened me when I told him to stop destroying HOA property." Officer Cole glanced at the half-finished cedar fence beside me, then at the bright orange extension cord running toward my garage. His partner stayed near the second cruiser, writing something down. "Mr. Mercer," Cole said, "did you threaten Ms. Whitmore?" "No, sir." Linda laughed once. "Sharp. Certain." He came right at me. He was holding that thing. She pointed at my drill like it had personally offended her. I looked at it lying harmlessly beside a box of 3-inch deck screws. Then I looked above Linda's head. My doorbell camera showed one tiny blue status light. Recording. That little light changed everything. See, Linda had made one mistake before calling 911. She had stood directly in front of that camera for 43 seconds while telling me exactly what she intended to do if I refused to stop building my fence. 43 seconds. Every word, every step, every time she crossed onto my property. And now she was giving the police a completely different version. Officer Cole pulled out his notebook. "Walk me through exactly what happened." Linda did. She said I had charged toward her. She said I had raised my drill. She said she feared for her safety. Each sentence came smoother than the last. I didn't interrupt. I didn't argue. I didn't even look angry. Years of crawling through hot attics repairing HVAC systems had taught me something useful. When a machine starts making the wrong noise, you don't kick it. You listen until it tells you what's broken. Linda was telling us plenty. When she finished, Cole turned toward me. "Your side." I nodded toward the front door. "Officer, before I give you my version, would you like to see the recording?" Linda's smile disappeared. Not slowly. Instantly. Her fingers tightened around the clipboard. Cole followed my eyes to the camera, then looked back at her. "Recording?" he asked. The morning suddenly felt very quiet. I could hear the faint hum of my garage refrigerator and the metallic tick of my drill cooling on the concrete. "Yes, sir," I said. "Audio too." Linda opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Officer Cole closed his notebook. "All right, Mr. Mercer. Show me." And that was the moment Linda's 911 call stopped being her weapon and started becoming my evidence. 6 months earlier, Cedar Ridge had looked like exactly the kind of place where nothing interesting ever happened, which was precisely why I bought there. I was 42, running my own heating and air conditioning business out of a silver Ford F-150 that had more miles than some commercial airplanes, and I had reached the point in life where quiet sounded better than impressive. The house sat near the end of a cul-de-sac outside Franklin, Tennessee, 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a 2-car garage, and a backyard shaded by 2 old maples. Nothing luxurious. Nothing I could not maintain myself. The first morning after I moved in, I stood in that garage drinking coffee from a chipped blue mug while sunlight spilled across boxes of tools I had not unpacked yet. The place smelled like cardboard, motor oil, and the cedar boards stacked against the wall. Those boards mattered to me. The fence along the east side of the property was nearly 20 years old, leaning badly enough that a strong Tennessee thunderstorm could probably finish the job. Before buying the house, I had paid for a boundary survey. I kept the stamped copy in a folder on my kitchen counter beside the closing documents. The surveyor had located the original iron property pins and marked them with bright red stakes. I photographed every one. Occupational habit. When you spend 20 years repairing equipment for homeowners who sometimes swear you damaged something that was already broken, you learn to document first and touch second. My doorbell camera came from the same instinct. So did the camera above the garage. I installed both before I finished unpacking. 3 days later, Linda Whitmore introduced herself. I heard the soft crunch of tires and looked up from replacing a rotten fence board to see a white Lexus rolling slowly toward my driveway. Linda stepped out carrying a clipboard. She was 51, maybe 52, with carefully styled blonde hair, spotless white sneakers, and the confident expression of somebody accustomed to entering conversations already convinced she was correct. "Daniel Mercer?" she asked. "That is me." She looked past me at my truck. "I am Linda Whitmore. I serve on the Cedar Ridge Homeowners Association board. Not welcome to the neighborhood. Not nice to meet you." Her eyes settled on the magnetic Mercer heating and air conditioning sign attached to my passenger door. "Commercial vehicles are restricted here." I wiped cedar dust from my palms. "It is my personal truck. It advertises a business. Because I own the business." Her smile tightened. She wrote something on the clipboard. Then she noticed the boards. "And exterior modifications require approval." I pointed toward the old fence. "I am replacing damaged boards. Same height, same location, same material. Still requires review." That was my first lesson about Linda. Questions were not really questions when she asked them. They were announcements wearing polite clothes. I told her I would check the association documents. She gave me a smile that looked practiced in a mirror and walked back toward her Lexus. Before leaving, she stopped beside one of those red survey stakes and stared at it for several seconds. I noticed because it was an odd thing to study. Then she looked toward my fence, back toward the stake, and finally toward me. "You might want to hold off on working over here," she said. "That boundary is not where you think it is." The Lexus disappeared around the corner, leaving the faint smell of exhaust behind. I looked down at the red stake, then at the stamped survey sitting through my kitchen window. At the time, I figured Linda was just another board member who enjoyed hearing herself sound important. I had no idea that 6 months later, that same little red stake would be sitting at the center of a police report. The first envelope arrived 4 days later, thick white paper with the Cedar Ridge logo printed across the top, and my name typed beneath it like I had already been convicted of something. I opened it at the kitchen counter while my coffee maker hissed behind me. $75 for an unauthorized commercial vehicle. I read the notice twice, walked outside, and looked at my truck sitting quietly in my own driveway. Then I pulled the association bylaws from the folder Linda had given me at closing. The rule prohibited commercial vehicles over 10,000 pounds and vehicles used primarily for deliveries. My Ford weighed nowhere near that, and it was registered as a personal vehicle. I emailed the board a copy of the registration and quoted the exact rule. 2 days later, the violation disappeared. No apology. The next envelope came the following week. $150 for improper exterior storage because 3 cedar boards had been leaning inside my open garage while I worked. I checked the bylaws again. The restriction applied to items stored outdoors overnight. My boards had never left the garage. I sent time-stamped camera images. That violation disappeared too. By the 3rd month, Linda had developed a rhythm. She would drive past slowly in the white Lexus, and within 48 hours another notice would arrive. Lawn edging. Temporary extension, cord visibility. Air conditioning equipment allegedly visible from the street. Once she cited me for excessive mechanical noise after I tested a condenser at 4:30 in the afternoon. Every time, I opened the rules, found the actual language, and answered with documentation. Every time, the board quietly withdrew the notice. Then Linda stopped targeting the little things. One Tuesday evening, I came home after replacing a compressor across town and found a certified letter tucked inside my storm door. The paper smelled faintly of fresh toner. Unauthorized fence construction. $250. Immediate work stoppage required. I stood on the porch reading it while cicadas buzzed in the maples. According to Linda, the eastern 6 feet of my yard were not actually mine. The letter called the strip a community landscaping easement and claimed Cedar Ridge controlled everything from my old fence to the neighboring sidewalk. I went straight to the kitchen and unfolded my stamped survey. My property line was clear. So were the iron pins. The next morning, I emailed Linda asking for the recorded easement. Her answer came 11 minutes later. Association maps supersede homeowner interpretations. I stared at that sentence. I had not given her an interpretation. I had given her a license survey. I asked for the map. She sent a scanned document with thick green lines drawn behind 6 houses, including mine. Something about it bothered me immediately. There was no county recording number, no surveyor's seal, no date I could verify, just a Cedar Ridge heading and a line labeled Community Maintenance Corridor. I printed it and laid it beside my county plat. The printer hummed in the quiet kitchen. Then I aligned the streets, lot corners, and drainage markings. The green corridor on Linda's map crossed directly through private parcels. Mine was not the only one. 5 other homeowners appear to have lost roughly 6 feet of backyard on paper. I leaned closer and felt that familiar sensation I got when diagnosing a system somebody had repaired badly before calling me. 1 wrong wire can look accidental. 6 identical wrong wires usually are not. My phone buzzed. Another message from Linda. $500 if I continued fence work. I looked through the window at the red survey stake beside the cedar boards. Linda thought she was burying me in paperwork. Instead, she had finally handed me something worth investigating. The next morning, I drove to the Williamson County Records office before my first service call. The building smelled like old paper, floor wax, and burnt coffee. I gave the clerk my parcel number and asked for every recorded document attached to my lot. Deed, subdivision plat, utility easements, drainage agreements, anything that could explain 6 missing feet of backyard. 20 minutes later, I was sitting at a small table beneath fluorescent lights with a stack of copies spread in front of me. There was a 10-foot utility easement along the rear property line. There was a drainage easement near the street. There was nothing resembling Linda's community maintenance corridor. I checked the neighboring parcels. Same result. The county plat showed 6 separate private lots extending exactly where Linda's green line claimed HOA control. I paid for certified copies and carried them outside in a manila envelope that suddenly felt heavier than paper should. That evening, I knocked on the door of the house directly behind mine. The owner, Robert Hayes, was 67 and had lived in Cedar Ridge for 14 years. When I showed him Linda's map, his expression changed. "That line again," he said. He disappeared into his house and returned with a folder. 3 years earlier, the association had fined him for building a small garden shed inside what Linda called the maintenance corridor. Robert had moved the shed and paid $900 in penalties because hiring an attorney would have cost more. 2 houses down, Melissa Grant had a similar story. She had been ordered to remove a row of privacy shrubs because they supposedly blocked HOA access. Another neighbor, Eric Dalton, had paid for landscaping changes after receiving threats of escalating fines. Different properties. Same green line. Same language. Same signature at the bottom of the notices. Linda Whitmore. By Friday night, my kitchen table looked like a paper version of Cedar Ridge. County plats on one side, HOA notices on the other. I used a yellow highlighter to mark every property affected. 6 houses. 6 private parcels. 1 imaginary corridor. I could have walked into the next board meeting and accused Linda of making it up, but accusations are cheap. Evidence lasts longer. So I did something Linda apparently never expected from the guy with the work truck. I stopped arguing. I answered every email politely. I asked precise questions. I requested meeting minutes, board approvals, maintenance invoices, and the original document creating the corridor. Linda responded with increasingly irritated messages, but never produced a recorded easement. Then the fines changed. $750. Notice of potential collection action. A warning that continued interference with HOA access could result in further legal remedies. I printed every message and saved digital copies. Meanwhile, I added another camera above the garage and adjusted the existing one to cover the eastern fence line. Nothing hidden, nothing dramatic. Just ordinary security cameras watching my own property. For nearly 2 weeks, nothing happened. Then at 11:43 on a Thursday night, my phone vibrated on the nightstand. Motion detected. I opened the camera feed. The image was grainy but clear enough. Linda stood beside my fence wearing a light jacket and holding a flashlight. Her white Lexus was parked down the street with the lights off. She looked toward my house, then down at the ground. The flashlight beam found one of the red survey stakes. Linda crouched beside it. I watched without moving. She gripped the stake, worked it loose, carried it several feet toward my house, and pushed it back into the soil. Then she brushed dirt from her hands and walked away. I replayed the recording twice. The house was silent except for the refrigerator humming in the kitchen. That little red stake had just answered the question I had been asking for weeks. Linda was not confused about the boundary. She needed the boundary to move. I did not confront Linda the next morning. That would have been satisfying for about 30 seconds and useful for absolutely nothing. Instead, I made coffee, watched the sunrise catch the tops of the maple trees, and copied the video onto 3 separate drives. 1 stayed in my desk. 1 went into my service truck. The 3rd went into the same manila folder as the certified county records. Then I called the survey company that had marked the property when I bought the house. The surveyor, Thomas Avery, remembered the lot. I told him one of his stakes had moved and asked him to verify the boundary again. He arrived Monday morning in a dusty Chevrolet Silverado with a tripod, measuring equipment, and the calm expression of a man who had spent 30 years settling arguments with numbers. The electronic equipment chirped softly as he worked along the eastern side of my yard. I stayed out of his way. 40 minutes later, Thomas pointed toward the red stake Linda had moved. That is not where I put it. He measured the difference. 5 feet, 8 inches. Almost exactly the distance Linda needed to create her imaginary corridor. Thomas located the original iron pin beneath the soil, checked the recorded plat, and drove a new red marker beside it. I photographed the location from 3 angles. Then I asked him for a signed written confirmation. By Wednesday, I had it. I still said nothing to Linda. That was the part she misunderstood. Silence does not always mean surrender. Sometimes it means somebody is building a file. Her emails kept arriving. One demanded immediate access for a landscaping inspection. Another claimed my refusal to recognize the corridor created a community safety concern. Then she sent a message stating that the association had maintained that strip of land for years. That claim interested me, so I requested maintenance invoices. No response. I requested board minutes authorizing the work. No response. I asked Robert, Melissa, and Eric whether HOA crews had ever maintained those 6 feet behind their homes. All 3 said no. Robert laughed and pointed at the old push mower in his garage. I have been cutting that grass myself since 2012. Another piece clicked into place. Friday afternoon, I bought the remaining cedar boards for my fence. The lumberyard smelled like sawdust and treated wood baking in the Tennessee heat. I loaded the boards into my truck, drove home, and stacked them inside the garage. Before sunset, I checked the cameras, charged my red drill, printed my county plat, and placed Thomas Avery's signed survey beside it on the kitchen counter. I also set the original HOA map next to both documents. 3 versions of the same strip of ground. Only one had a county stamp. At 6:45 the next morning, I carried my coffee outside. The neighborhood was barely awake. Sprinklers whispered across lawns. A dog barked somewhere beyond the cul-de-sac. I stretched an orange extension cord from the garage, even though the drill was cordless because I needed power for my saw, then started replacing the first section of fence exactly on the verified property line. Cedar dust floated through the morning light. At 7:11, a familiar white Lexus turned onto the street. It slowed when Linda saw me. She parked across from my house instead of pulling into my driveway. The door opened. Clipboard first. Linda second. She walked directly toward the new red survey stake. Her eyes dropped to it, and for one brief second, the confidence disappeared from her face. She knew that marker was back where it belonged. Then she looked at the fence, looked at me, and reached for her phone. Daniel, stop immediately. I set one cedar board against the post and checked it with my level. Good morning, Linda. You have been formally ordered not to build on association property. This is my property. Her shoes crossed from the sidewalk onto my lawn. My doorbell camera caught her from the front. The garage camera had the side angle. I am warning you, she said. I looked at the red stake between us. You already moved the warning once. Linda froze. Just for a second. Then her thumb moved across her phone screen. Fine, she said. We will let the police explain it to you. At 7:13, she placed a call that would turn every camera on my property into something far more valuable than security. The first patrol car turned into the cul-de-sac 5 minutes later, followed by a second cruiser less than 30 seconds behind it. No sirens. Just flashing lights painting the beige houses red and blue while neighbors began appearing behind curtains. I switched off my saw and placed it on the workbench inside the garage. Linda stayed near the sidewalk, phone pressed to her ear until the first officer stepped out. That was Nathan Cole. Mid-40s, calm voice. The kind of officer who looked at everything before deciding what mattered. His partner, Officer Rachel Bennett, walked toward Linda while Cole approached me. My drill was still in my hand from setting the last screw. Sir, put the drill down and keep your hands where I can see them. I placed it on the concrete. That was where this story had started for you. But what happened during the next few minutes was the reason I had stayed quiet for months. Linda told Cole I had threatened her. She said I had moved toward her aggressively while holding the drill. Then she added something I had not expected. I thought he might use it as a weapon. Cole looked at the drill, then at me. Did you threaten her? No, sir. Linda jumped in before he could ask anything else. He has been hostile toward the association for weeks. He refuses lawful instructions. He is destroying community property right now. I could smell fresh cedar dust on my shirt. The sprinkler across the street clicked 3 times. I watched Cole write in his notebook. What exactly did he say? Linda hesitated. He told me I would regret coming onto this property. That was new too. I almost smiled. Almost. Instead, I looked toward the doorbell camera. Officer, would you like to see the recording? Linda's face changed. Cole followed me to the porch while Bennett remained with her. I opened the security application on my phone and selected the clip beginning at 7:11. The audio was clean. Linda's voice came through the speaker first. Daniel, stop immediately. Then mine. Good morning, Linda. We watched her cross the sidewalk. We watched her step onto my lawn. We heard her claim the land belonged to the association. We heard me say it was my property. Then came the sentence that mattered. I am warning you. And my answer? You already moved the warning once. No threat. No raised voice. No movement toward her. Nothing resembling the story she had just told police. Cole watched the entire 43 seconds without speaking. When the video ended, he looked at Linda across the driveway. Ms. Whitmore, come over here, please. She walked toward us quickly. That recording does not show everything. Cole held up one hand. You told me he approached you while holding the drill. He did before that. I tapped the screen. The garage camera covers the previous 10 minutes. Silence. Linda looked toward the camera above my garage for the first time that morning. Officer Bennett noticed. You also told dispatch there was a weapon involved, she said. Linda folded her arms. A power tool can be dangerous. Cole glanced at my drill sitting exactly where he had told me to place it. Did Mr. Mercer threaten to use it against you? Linda's mouth tightened. I felt threatened. That is not what I asked. The air seemed to lose 10 degrees. I reached through my open front door and picked up the manila folder from the entry table. There is something else you should probably see. I handed Cole the certified county plat and Thomas Avery's signed survey. Then I opened another video. 11:43 at night. Linda appeared on the screen carrying a flashlight. Cole leaned closer as she crouched beside the red marker, pulled it from the ground, carried it 5 feet 8 inches toward my house, and pushed it back into the soil. Linda stopped talking. Officer Bennett looked from the screen to the red stake beside the fence. Then Cole asked the question that changed the entire morning. Ms. Whitmore, why were you moving a surveyed property marker on land you just told us belongs to the association? Linda stared at Officer Cole like the question itself was offensive. I was correcting an inaccurate marker, she said. Her voice had lost that polished board meeting smoothness. The association has maintained that corridor for years. Cole looked down at the certified plat in his hand. Do you have documentation showing the association owns it? Of course. Do you have it with you? Linda glanced toward her Lexus. Not physically. I said nothing. I had learned that silence made Linda nervous when there was paperwork nearby. Officer Bennett asked me to send copies of both camera clips to an official evidence address. I did it from my phone while standing on the porch. The confirmation arrived before Linda finished explaining why a homeowners association board member supposedly needed to move a survey marker close to midnight. Cole photographed the red stake, the fence line, and the original iron pin Thomas Avery had uncovered. Then he took separate statements from both of us. When he returned my documents, his voice was careful. The ownership dispute itself is a civil matter, Mr. Mercer. We are not determining property title here today. Understood. He tapped the folder. But the statements made during this call and what appears on those recordings are separate issues. Keep all of this. I almost laughed. Keeping records was the one thing Linda had trained me to do exceptionally well. The patrol cars left 20 minutes later. Linda remained beside her Lexus for a moment, staring across the street at me. The confidence was gone. She drove away without another word. By noon, Robert Hayes was standing in my garage holding his old violation folder. Melissa arrived 10 minutes later carrying printed emails. Eric brought canceled checks showing payments he had made after being threatened with escalating fines. The smell of cedar and coffee filled the garage while we spread everything across my workbench. That was when the pattern became impossible to ignore. Same corridor, same language, same fines, same signature. Linda had claimed the association needed access for landscaping, but Robert had maintained his own strip for 14 years. Melissa had photographs showing her family mowing theirs. Eric had receipts from a lawn service he had personally hired. None of US could find a single invoice showing Cedar Ridge had maintained those areas. Then Melissa noticed something I had missed. Look at the dates. She placed two notices side by side. Linda's corridor map had first appeared 3 years earlier, shortly before the association began discussing a walking path behind our homes. Robert disappeared across the street and returned with old meeting minutes. There it was. Proposed neighborhood pedestrian connection. The proposal had been tabled because obtaining easements from 6 homeowners would cost too much. I felt the pieces locked together. The association had considered acquiring access legally. It had not happened. Yet sometime afterward, Linda started treating the land as though permission already existed. My phone buzzed that afternoon. An email from the Cedar Ridge Board Secretary, Susan Parker. She had received notice about the police response and wanted copies of the documents involved. I sent the county plat, Thomas Avery's survey, Linda's map, and the nighttime recording. 27 minutes later, Susan replied with one sentence. Daniel, I have never seen this corridor map before. That sentence mattered more than every fine Linda had mailed me. By Sunday evening, 2 other board members had said the same thing. Linda had repeatedly written association property, but nobody could identify a vote creating it, a deed granting it, or a recorded easement establishing it. Monday morning brought another surprise. Officer Cole called and asked whether I still had the original notices Linda had sent. Every one, I told him. Paper rustled on his end. Good. Do not throw anything away. After we hung up, I stood in the garage looking at the workbench covered with months of letters, surveys, photographs, and payment records. Linda had called the police expecting one official conversation to scare me into surrendering 6 feet of land. Instead, she had created a documented event that made everyone start asking the same question I had been asking from the beginning. Where did that green line actually come from? The emergency board meeting was scheduled for Thursday at 7 in the Cedar Ridge Clubhouse, a room usually reserved for budget arguments, holiday decorations, and complaints about mailbox paint. That night, every folding chair was occupied before I arrived. The air smelled like burnt coffee and lemon cleaner. Linda sat at the front table beside Susan Parker and 3 other board members, wearing a navy blazer and the same expression she had worn the first day she inspected my truck. Controlled. Polished. Certain she could talk her way through anything. I carried one manila folder and a small laptop. Nothing else. Susan opened the meeting and immediately addressed the property corridor. Linda interrupted before she finished. This entire situation is being distorted by a homeowner who refuses to cooperate with established community standards. I waited. Susan looked toward me. Daniel, show us what you have. I started with the simplest document in the room. The certified county plat. I placed it on the screen and highlighted my eastern boundary. Then I showed Thomas Avery's signed survey confirming the original iron pin and the location of the red stake. Next came Linda's green corridor map. I put the 2 images side by side. A low murmur moved through the room. Where did the green map come from? Board member Michael Reeves asked. Linda leaned toward her microphone. It has been used administratively for years. That was not the question, Susan said. Linda's jaw tightened. I opened the meeting minutes Robert had saved. 3 years earlier, Cedar Ridge had considered purchasing easements behind 6 homes for a pedestrian path. The proposal had been tabled because of cost and homeowner objections. No easements were purchased. No deeds were signed. No county documents were recorded. Then I displayed Linda's first violation notices, issued months after that failed proposal, describing the same land as an existing community maintenance corridor. Michael stopped taking notes. Who authorized these fines? Linda shifted in her chair. The board delegated compliance matters. Susan shook her head. Not the creation of property rights. That was when Robert stood and held up his folder. Melissa had hers. Eric had his canceled checks. One by one, they described fines tied to the same 6-foot strip. Nobody shouted. Nobody needed to. Paper has a different kind of volume when enough people bring the same evidence. Then I played the nighttime recording. The clubhouse went silent except for the laptop speakers. Gravel under Linda's shoes. The faint rustle of grass. The metallic scrape as the red stake came out of the ground. On the screen, she carried it 5 feet 8 inches toward my house and pushed it back into the soil. Linda looked down at the table. I followed with the 43-second doorbell recording from Saturday morning. Her command to stop. My refusal. Her warning. No threat. No aggressive movement. Then I read the wording documented from her police statement claiming I had approached her while holding the drill. Michael leaned back slowly. Linda, these accounts do not match. She finally raised her voice. I felt threatened. I was trying to protect association property. Susan placed both hands flat on the table. Property we apparently do not own. That ended the argument. The association attorney, who had been sitting quietly near the wall, asked the board to suspend all enforcement connected to the corridor and preserve every email, notice, payment record, and map associated with it. He recommended an independent review of the fines collected from all 6 households. Linda tried to object, but Susan called for a vote. Her hands went up. Linda stayed down. Effective immediately, her compliance authority was suspended pending review. The room remained strangely quiet after the vote. I closed my laptop and slid it into my bag. I had imagined that moment several times over the previous months, but victory did not sound like cheering. It sounded like pages turning as homeowners compared records. It sounded like a lawyer asking for copies. It sounded like Linda realizing that every letter she had mailed, every fine she had signed, and every sentence she had given police now belonged to a file she could no longer control. The review took 23 days. I know because I marked every one of them on the calendar beside my refrigerator, not because I was waiting for revenge, but because I wanted my fence finished before the first hard frost. Cedar Ridge hired an outside property attorney and an independent accountant to examine the corridor records. What they found was simpler than any conspiracy and worse for Linda than any excuse she could invent. There was no recorded community easement behind our 6 homes. There never had been. The proposed walking path had died 3 years earlier, exactly where Robert's meeting minutes said it had. Linda had continued using an internal planning map after the proposal failed, treating a proposed corridor as though it were established association property. Over 3 years, homeowners had paid thousands of dollars in fines and unnecessary landscaping costs because of notices built around that false assumption. The board sent each affected household a written correction. Improper fines were reversed or refunded. Robert received his $900 back. Eric received reimbursement for the penalties documented in his records. Melissa got written confirmation that the land behind her house belonged to her, not Cedar Ridge. My balance went from more than $1,000 in claim violations to 0. Then came Linda. The board voted to remove her from all compliance responsibilities and accepted her resignation from the board shortly afterward. The association attorney also instructed Cedar Ridge to preserve the records connected to the police incident and property marker footage for any further review by the appropriate authorities. Nobody marched Linda out of the neighborhood. Nobody needed to. The consequence that mattered was simpler. She could no longer turn her personal interpretation into somebody else's official-looking problem. The white Lexus stopped making slow passes by my driveway. The envelopes stopped arriving. The clipboard disappeared. A week later, Officer Cole called one final time to confirm that the footage and documents had been retained with the incident record. Before hanging up, he said something I remembered. "You made this easy by keeping everything." I looked at the folders stacked on my kitchen table. "She helped with that," I said. Saturday morning, I finally finished the fence. The temperature was 48 degrees, cool enough that my coffee steamed when I carried it outside. Cedar boards rested on sawhorses beside the driveway. My red Milwaukee drill sat where it had been the morning the patrol cars arrived. I walked to the eastern boundary and found the survey marker Thomas Avery had placed beside the original iron pin. Red paint. A little Tennessee mud around the bottom. I cleaned it with an old shop rag and checked the measurement one final time. 5 feet 8 inches separated the true boundary from the place Linda had tried to move it. 5 feet 8 inches had produced months of letters, fines, meetings, and one completely unnecessary police call. I drove the marker firmly into the correct spot. Clang. The sound carried across the quiet yard. Robert waved from behind his house. Melissa was planting new shrubs along her restored property line. Somewhere down the street, a mower started. Ordinary neighborhood sounds. Exactly what I had wanted when I moved there. I set the final cedar board, checked the level, and drove in the last screw. The drill gave one short mechanical whine, then silence. I stepped back. Straight fence. Correct boundary. No argument left. Above the front door, the camera still watched the driveway, its tiny blue light barely visible in the morning sun. I thought about Linda standing beneath it that Saturday, certain a badge would turn her version of events into the truth. She had called the police because she wanted official witnesses to tell me where my property ended. Instead, she brought two official witnesses to the exact place where her authority did.